Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's good to see many of you here. In fact, all of you here. Today I'm going to talk about a long-term interest and passion of mine. Essentially, I've been, for as long as I can remember, I've been interested in plants and weeds and in managing those. I've then taken that forward throughout my career and here today to talk to you about a number of those. Bathurst burr is the first one that I'm going to introduce you to. You can see it on the top of the screen there. And we're also going to talk about Bathurst burr bioherbicide, right there. A bioherbicide for Bathurst burr. We're talking about those two things and how we've overcome a global limitation in the application of bioherbicides that can be used for other biopesticides. Before I jump into that though, weeds cost the Australian economy around $5 billion per annum. That's a big cost, and obviously we need to try and control those in some way, and biological control is a way that we can do that. Have a look. Has anybody seen a field that's been looking like that lately? That's great. I was hoping for that response because that's a field full of prickly pear, and in the 1900s, about the size of England was covered in eastern Australia with a prickly pear. It was such a big problem that it was increasing at about half the size of Wales each year. So that was being added on and added on and added on. And of course, if people can't graze and they can't move around and they can't make any money, that's also a problem. The biological control agent, the insect that they introduced for that is Cactoblastis caterpillar there, but of course it grows into a moth and it feeds around, eats the pads, and of course you end up with something looking like this and turning that into something that looks a bit like this, where people can make some money, they can move around, they can ride their horses around, and of course animals can graze and things are a lot better. Biological controls are very useful and a good thing, and it's not only just about introducing insects, it's also about using naturally occurring pathogens to cause disease of plants. And that's where we talk about Bathurst burr today. This is Bathurst burr. Many of you will know it. It's a major pain in the bum as well because if you land in it, you'll become stuck with some of those spines there. Because of the spines, the animals don't like eating in it or around it, and of course it sucks up, if you're a crop plant, it sucks up all the water and the nutrients that you want to grow. It's a big problem, and it causes big problems in terms of crop losses. For example, in the top 10 cotton exporting nations, 390 million US per year. Yes, and it's a massive problem across the world as well. And in fact, in 82 countries, they're battling with this weed and trying to get control of it. There we go. It's not only the major exporting countries. Australia, we know that we're major exports of grain, of cotton, of wool, many other things, of course, as well. Australia, New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand, USA and South Africa. But it's also a problem in developing economies as well, India and China. Parts of Eastern Europe, the Ukraine and Russia, parts of South America, Brazil and Mexico, parts of Southern Africa, as well as in the quite developed economies in Western Europe. The kicker here is that, in Australia particularly, is that of the weeds professionals that I talked to, around 200 of those, and they said, look, we don't want to actually spray chemicals that are toxic or poisonous to try and get rid of it, because it occurs in environmental areas, and it's pretty hard to control as well. Obviously, there's a fair few problems there that we can look at. This is how control of Bathurst burr looks at the moment, and that's a nicely lit and quite good colour, a photo, of course. And for those of you in Broadacre, you'll know all about this. Unfortunately, when people see a nice picture like that, they think of something that's not quite so nice and it looks a bit like this. There's lots of people that think that. Unfortunately, people think that because the spray might drift onto their susceptible crop next door, or perhaps into their susceptible pasture, or perhaps they're just concerned about sprays as well. All this makes a problem, and a solution could be Bathurst burr bioherbicide, BBB. A bioherbicide that's full of naturally occurring spores that will cause disease and cause plant death. We know from our work that it's been far less expensive to develop this bioherbicide, and of course it's far less expensive to apply as well. It is as effective as the commonly used alternatives, and of course it is safe. A naturally occurring pathogen that won't hurt man or animals when it's applied. There we go. Basically, the technology that we've placed in this has overcome the global limitation in that before, you sprayed your bioherbicide, you had to wait for rain or dew to activate it to get disease like this, and then in a couple of weeks, a dead plant like this. The technology that we've placed in that has meant that we don't have to wait for that dew or moisture condition. Because as a father and as a scientist, it's important to me that people like these people are safe whenever they go to the playground, whenever they go to the park, in the bush, wherever they are. And that's a good and a great thing, and it's what really drives me forward as well. And safety in the community also drives me forward. But to achieve that, we've had to actually add a fair bit of this, which is a good deal of experience, another dose of wisdom, a little bit of age, and all three of us to come together to produce, as I said to you, an opportunity for you, in fact, two global firsts, the Bathurst bioherbicide, BBB, but also the technology to place this in other pesticides so that they can work without that dew or moisture commitment requirement. We know that from our tests, BBB is 100% effective and it is environmentally safe. We've already covered off on that point, but we are looking for a commercial partner to take not only BBB forward, but also the technology that can be placed in that, but in other biopesticides. Please come and see us afterwards, and we'd love to have a chat with you. Ladies and gentlemen.